Photography is everywhere. It is the world's most popular pastime. Every single day we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on our camera equipment, upgrading our cameras, upgrading our lenses. But whatever way you choose to capture your photographs and view the world, whether it's through your camera or by using your smartphone, we all have the same objective. We want to capture better photographs. And photography is exciting and can be a profession, but it's also technically challenging, and our cameras can be very difficult to understand. But our goal is clear. We want to capture photographs that we're going to remember. We want to capture those moments that we don't want to miss, share them with the world, and most importantly, look back on them, on those important memories when we get older. My name is William Eames. This is my professional diploma in photography course with Shaw Academy. You are very welcome to it. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping to get through, just so you all know how everything works here in Shaw Academy and on the lessons. So your first port of call to attend the lessons is to join us through the website, so www.shawacademy.com. I'm sure many of you are doing that already. We also recommend that if you are watching through the website to use Google Chrome as your browser, as it is the fastest browser out there, so it's the best for buffering the videos quickly. You can also join us via the app. We do encourage that as well, so you can watch on your tablet or your phone. It is available on both the App Store and the Play Store. You can also manage your class schedule here as well. Very, very important, so that you never ever miss a class. But if you have missed a class, it is possible as well, of course, to go back over recordings at any time and any stage. Now, in case you're wondering, lessons are just 30 minutes long in this module. So that means it's just 1 hour a week to change your photography. So to completely change how you take photographs and improve the quality of your photos, and to maybe even go even further with that and make photography a career for yourself, all it takes is 1 hour of lessons a week. Now, did you know that you can manage your classes through your course page? So the first option available to you is that you can reschedule a class. So if the time and dates that you've picked don't suit you, it is possible to change the class date and time. Make sure that you never ever miss a class by adding it to your calendar. So that way, on top of the reminders that we send you, you'll also remind yourself that you've got a class coming up. And if for some reason you're finding that you're missing out on a lot of lessons and you feel you're falling behind a little bit, don't panic and don't worry. It's always possible to restart your course schedule from the beginning at any stage. We want to make sure that you never ever miss any lessons and that you get the full experience, the full value out of this photography course. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's get into lesson number 1. Now, so who is this course for? Well, it's for anybody with a camera. All types of cameras, all types and levels of photographer are welcome. It is the photographer that makes the photograph, not the camera. The camera is simply a tool that you need to learn to use correctly, so it'll unlock your creative potential. So do not feel restricted by what you might have right now. Any camera that's available to you is perfect. But let's have a look at some of the main types of cameras that you may be using throughout this course. Beginning with, of course, our smartphones. And smartphones are overwhelmingly the most popular way to capture photographs in the modern era. And this is because they're small and portable. Literally every person has a smartphone or some type of device that's capable of capturing a photograph. They're very fast, they're very easy to use, and probably the biggest advantage with them is the fact that we can share our photographs with the world absolutely in an instant. It's crazy. Just straight away you take a photograph and it appears online in almost the same instance. There's so many useful tools out there for editing our photographs through our smartphones. Snapseed is one that I recommend. We'll be talking about that certainly a little bit more as we continue on throughout this course. However, they are limited in their lenses and in their image sensor size. Image sensor is the chip that's in our cameras and our phones where the image gets recorded. They can be very, very expensive indeed. But despite this, they are the most popular type of camera in the world currently. Moving up from this, then, we also have our humble compact camera. And unfortunately, these cameras are somewhat of a dying breed. But these are small and portable, and again, very fast and easy to use. They're designed for anybody to be able to pick up and start taking great photographs straight away. Many offer zoom lenses and other options, and zoom lenses give you more options when you're out there taking photographs. But again, we are restricted to smaller image sensors, which means that the quality of our photographs wouldn't be at a professional level. There's a huge variety of shooting modes available within these types of cameras. They are very much competing with the modern smartphone. Again, they can be very, very expensive, and unfortunately they are becoming replaced and redundant due to the popularity of our smartphones. Moving a step up away from this, we have our bridge cameras, sometimes known as hybrid cameras as well. These are a much larger size, and we're getting closer to what we would call our typical looking camera. These are very convenient for travel as they have this all-in-one lens. These, you have these huge zoom ranges available to them, which will allow you to get in very, very close to your subject if needs be. So they're great for things like safari, or if you do a huge amount of traveling and you don't want to be carrying around a huge amount of extra equipment. So they're absolutely great for budding photographers. So if you haven't bought yourself a camera yet, this may be a better option for you. Much more control over compacts and phones. As I mentioned, enormous zoom ranges available, but do be aware, lenses cannot be changed on these types of cameras. Often, new students will get confused with these cameras, thinking that they're like a DSLR or like a mirrorless camera, but the lenses cannot be changed on these cameras. However, you don't need to change the lenses because those zoom ranges are so great, but their image quality is limited compared to our higher end models like our mirrorless cameras and our DSLRs. Now, moving on to our upper end models. First of all, we have our mirrorless cameras, which are at the forefront of camera technology, absolutely exploded in popularity in present history of photography. They are smaller and lighter than our DSLRs. Their lenses can be changed as well. They don't quite have the same range of lenses as DSLRs at the moment, but that is very quickly changing as more and more companies are investing into creating lenses for these types of cameras. They have larger sensor sizes, larger image sizes. Image sensor sizes, I should say. This means that you get a higher quality image. As I mentioned, lens range is a little bit more limited compared to our DSLRs. They are also very expensive. Don't expect to pay less money for a mirrorless camera compared to a DSLR. And most brands will offer a mirrorless option now, but certainly Sony, as I speak at the moment, are certainly at the forefront of the mirrorless revolution. Now, if you don't understand the term between a mirrorless or a DSLR, don't worry, we will indeed cover that. But moving on to our DSLR, our digital single lens reflex. That is what a DSLR stands for. Single lens reflex cameras were the film cameras that we used in the past when we were able to change the lenses, that they now have simply become a digital single lens reflex. Digital single lens reflex, DSLR. This has been the standard for amateurs and professionals for decades. Gives us the highest quality and control over our photographs. Huge range of lenses available for these types of cameras. Very large sensor sizes available within these cameras as well, giving us the highest image quality. And as I said, lots and lots and lots of lenses available from all different types of brands for these types of cameras. There's a huge range of prices as well. So If you're considering buying your first camera, you're probably better off looking at a DSLR compared to a mirrorless option, but I'll speak about that now a little bit more in just a moment. And they can be very clunky and heavy. Very, very clunky and heavy. So do be aware that if you are buying your camera for the first time, try to visit your local camera shop to actually get a feel of the camera, because it will influence your purchase, and I speak from experience on that. So I want you to let me know, what camera are you currently using? Are you using a mirrorless camera? Are you using a DSLR? Have you got a compact? Are you simply using your smartphone? You can interact with me throughout these lessons via Morpheus. I'm sure you have seen him already in the lower right hand corner of your screens. He is here to answer any questions you may have. Please remember to rate the responses though, so that we can continually improve the quality of the feedback that you get. You can also reach out to us at any stage, support@shawacademy.com. So do let me know what type of camera you are using. I'd love to know how I can better improve the course for you for the type of equipment that you have right now. And if you are buying your very first camera, perhaps you are taking this course to get an idea of what should be your first purchase, I can give you a few pointers on that side of it as well. My very first top tip is probably the most obvious one, is have a budget. Set yourself a budget, but also give yourself a little bit of wiggle room. Very, very frequently, very often, you will get a good kit, which will get you a second lens, perhaps, or perhaps some extra accessories for an extra $100 or so. So give yourself a little bit of wiggle room. But €500, $500 is a really good place to start, and it is more than enough to get yourself a really good camera to begin with. If you're checking out reviews online, please read them with a pinch of salt. There's a lot of bias out there. There's a lot of people who will review very expensive cameras saying you should go for this one without taking into regard how much money they cost. So do read reviews with a pinch of salt. Take your time and visit camera shops. I can't stress that enough. Go to your local camera shop, talk to the people there, they'll give you advice, you get a chance to try out the cameras. As I said, get a feel of those cameras in your hand to make sure it's right for you. And you can also build a relationship up with your local camera shop there as well, and get discounts in the future, because you are going to be buying a lot of accessories. And kit lenses are enough to begin with. There's no reason to go out and buy lots and lots of lenses to start off with. The one that comes with your camera is designed to get you going, and it's a very versatile lens. And if you're looking for a place to start, you can't go wrong with the old reliables, Canon and Nikon. Now, there's no brand bias on this course at all, but Canon and Nikon are the two brand staples. Of course, there's plenty of other brands out there to check out, like Fuji, like Olympus, like Pentax, and indeed Sony as well. And mirrorless are a great option if you don't want to carry around too much, but they are going to be more expensive. Don't think you're going to get a cheaper camera because you're going with a mirrorless camera. But every single camera is capable of taking a great photograph. You just have to learn how to use it. Now, so those are my top tips, but if you want a little bit more guidance, like if you were reading articles online, you'd probably be under the impression that DSLRs are on their way out, which simply isn't true. These are the top 10 selling cameras over the last decade, and as you can see, Canon is at number one there with the KISS X7, as it's known in Japan, the Rebel SL1 as it's known in the States, and the EOS 100D as it's known in Europe and the UK. As you can see here as well, Canon very much, not dominating the list, but they do have the top three highest selling cameras. Nikon, good representation in there as well. And we have one Sony camera, which is the fabulous Sony Alpha 6000, the only mirrorless camera on the list. Now, the next decade may bring very big changes. We might see certainly more mirrorless cameras making their way in here, especially since Canon and Nikon have made their way into the mirrorless market. Sony continue to dominate. We still have our brands like Olympus and Fuji there as well. But This is a very, very good list of cameras to choose from as well. These are all well in that type of budget I was speaking about there. Some exceptions like the 60D and the A6000 would be a little bit more expensive. But if there was one there that I was to pick, and I'm really not showing any bias here because I've used so many different brands of camera, I really don't have any kind of allegiance, but the Nikon D5300 would be my pick there for anyone who's getting into photography for the first time. It's such a great, well-rounded camera, very straightforward in some ways to use, but also has just exceptional quality for the price that you are paying for it. But any of these cameras on this list would give you a tremendous photograph and would be a great investment for your hard-earned money. Now, before we have a look at how our cameras work, we need to take a very, very short journey back in time and have a look at how the camera obscura works. So the camera obscura is a device that will allow us to project an outside image onto either a wall or a piece of paper, or something like this, where it's just simply in a box. We can project the outside on the inside. And a camera obscura works using the physics of light and actually works the exact same way our eyes work. And the camera obscura, was first kind of used, the idea of it was all the way back with Chinese philosophers, back nearly 600 AD. But it started being used in particular around the time of the Renaissance and in art history to create accurate paintings. And as you can see here, how it works is that the light that is being reflected off an object enters through this little aperture, this little opening here, and will be projected upside down and backwards on the screen in the back. This is the exact same way that our eyes and our cameras work. But what happens when we see is that our brain turns the image the right side up and the right way around as well. And camera obscuras were, as I said, they were used by mathematicians, they were used by architects, they were used by painters to produce accurate sketchings and etchings of the world around them. But the idea of lenses, the idea of the camera existed long before the ability to be able to actually record those images with light and to make them permanent. First onto metal, then onto negatives, and then in the modern era onto our digital imaging sensors. So what actually happens when we click? What actually happens when we take a photograph? Well, you're going to get very, very familiar with this, the exposure triangle, and you may have come across this if you've done a little bit of research around photography before. It is a very, very useful guide to how our cameras work and how to capture a photograph. An exposure is a photograph. An exposure is the light hitting our image sensor or hitting our piece of film and creating an image. And our photographs are made up of light, of time, and of sensitivity. Light, time, and sensitivity, and these three things combined will give us our exposure, will give us our photograph. So when we press the shutter button, the exposure button, I should say, as it's more accurate, light will enter through our lens via an aperture, the lens opening. The light will be recorded for a certain amount of time via shutter speed. And finally, the light is recorded onto film or camera sensor to make our photograph. And that film or camera sensor, the sensitivity of that is changed by controlling the ISO. That is the basic idea behind our exposure and our exposure triangle. It's light controlled by the aperture, time controlled by the shutter speed, and tertiary, it's sensitivity, the sensitivity of the medium that is being used to record light that will create our photograph. For the majority of this course, we're going to focus on light and time, as these are the two primary elements that we need to create a photograph. So with that in mind, let's take a look at a DSLR and let's cut it in half. So here we have a standard DSLR. a digital single lens reflex, as we've learned earlier. And if we were to take this apart and have a look at the insides, this is pretty much what we are going to see. Okay, we're going to see lots and lots of glass. We're going to see light enter through the lens. So this red line is the light entering through our lens, entering through the camera's aperture. And what's happening is that it is bouncing off a mirror. So this device here is the DSLR's mirror. Okay, and this deflects the light and it bounces it up into this really odd looking device called a pentaprism. The light bounces all around this and it pops out the end here to allow us to see through the camera's viewfinder. Located behind the mirror is our film or our image sensor. So this is where the image gets recorded. Now, very important to note, only DSLRs and film cameras have pentaprisms. They do not have any effect on the photograph. So when we're not taking a photograph, when the camera is, I suppose, what we'd call its down position, the mirror down, the light is being reflected up off this mirror out to the viewfinder, allowing us to see. Now, let me ask you a question. What happens when we take a photograph using a DSLR? So if you're using a DSLR camera, for that split second that we take a photograph, what happens? Type your answer into Morpheus. And don't worry if you don't have a DSLR, but for those of you who do, just think for a second or even try it. What happens to the viewfinder in particular when you take a photograph? Well, it goes black. It goes black for the amount of time that it takes to capture the camera and to capture the photograph, I should say. And the reason that it does this is that when we take the exposure, when we press the exposure button, the mirror lifts up and the shutter opens, allowing the light to pass through and be captured onto the film or onto the image sensor for the duration of time set by the shutter speed. So light enters through the lens via the aperture. We press our exposure to allow light to pass through to reach the image sensor for the amount of time set by the shutter speed. Now, don't worry if these terms are still a little bit foreign to you, still a little bit difficult to understand. We're going to be building upon this knowledge as we continue on through the rest of the lessons. Now, if you happen to be using a phone, a mirrorless camera, a bridge camera, the process is somewhat simplified. Light enters through our lens, but because mirrorless cameras don't have a mirror, hence the name mirrorless cameras, and the light goes right through to the sensor, and basically the sensor becomes active when we press the shutter button. So the sensor will only become active and record light for the duration of time set by the shutter speed when we press the exposure button. Basically then it's simply inactive until we bring it to life by pressing the shutter button. And the EVF, an electronic viewfinder, simply a little screen that will allow us to see through that EVF, the electronic viewfinder. So a little bit more simplified using cameras that are mirrorless. Our bridge cameras are indeed our mobile phones as well. Now, I want you to be able to complete this lesson and get out there and start taking photographs straight away. So these tips will help you to get started with your photography. And the first tip that I would offer is to invest in a good tripod. If there's one thing every single photographer should have, no matter what type of photography they do, no matter what level of photographer they are, is to get a good tripod. Good tripod will last you a very, very long time. I bought my tripod about a decade ago. I spent about €100 on it, and it's still going. It's still very, very good. It's a little bit heavy is the only issue that I have with it. So be sure to try before you buy. Again, visit your local camera shop for advice on tripods, to try out various tripods for your camera, because they're all different heights, they're all different materials, they're all different weights, etc. You want to make sure that you get one that's durable. Plastic tripods are not going to last. They're going to have a shorter lifespan compared to something, say, like a carbon fiber one. But of course, you pay for what you get. Okay, but that said, try to buy the best one that your budget will allow. Now, sometimes when we're out there photographing, our autofocus systems can be infuriating, especially in situations where the light is a little bit lower or perhaps indoors as well. So remember to check out our manual focus too. So you'll find the manual focus switch located on your camera's lens, or sometimes also on your camera body as well. And this can really help you out of tricky situations when the camera just won't get that focus in particular times when the light is low. Now, manual focus as well, not always going to be ideal. So for things like very high speed sports photography, and manual focus isn't going to be your best option there. But it is also great for if you are recording events. So if you like to do a little bit of video as well as your photography, manual focus is a good way to go because it's nice and silent and you can control it that little bit more as well. So don't forget that if you are struggling a little bit, just to flick that switch to manual focus, but always be sure to flick it back as well when you are finished, because you don't want to miss that next shot because you left the manual focus on. And speaking of focus, so many of us really enjoy doing portraiture and portrait photography, and my top tip here is to focus. Always focus on the eyes, unless you've got a specific reason not to, but we make contact with our subjects, whether they're human, whether they're animals, to focus on the eyes. And I mean, photographing animals is so popular that even new cameras now have animal eye detection, so that they'll actually try to find your dog's or your cat's eyes to make sure that their face is nice and sharp. So always be sure to try to take your focus from the eyes where possible, because this is where we make connection with the subject in the photograph. And also try to mix it up as well. When we're out there photographing, we can very much get into a rhythm of simply photographing from our own height. Okay, but don't just shoot from eye level. Get up, get down, shoot upwards, shoot downwards, shoot side to side. Our bodies have a full range of motion and our world is in 3D. So explore it as much as possible. The whole point of photography is to capture the world in a unique and interesting way, a way that we don't see it in the everyday. So take this opportunity with your photography. And many new cameras now have those variable LCDs, those variable rotating screens, that makes life a lot easier to get down a lot lower or even up that little bit higher as well to get that perfect photograph. And my final tip, and perhaps the most important tip here as well, is to simply enjoy your photography. We can get so wrapped up in whether our photographs are good or not, especially because we post them up on social media, that it can really be a blow to our confidence. But just remember why you're doing it. Experiment with what you can capture. You are capturing the world unique to you. No one else can capture the world the way that you see it. Okay, so experiment with what you can do with your photography. Photograph new subjects as well. Push yourself a little bit. Don't just stick to photographing landscapes if you're into doing landscapes, or portraits if you're into doing portraits. Try and push things out a little bit and explore. You'll be surprised at what you might find. Take your time as well. You're under no pressure. Take your time with this, especially if you're new to it. Doesn't matter if you get it wrong. Everybody makes mistakes. I still make mistakes. Every photographer will make mistakes, no matter how long they are at it, because you are always learning and improving. You're constantly with photography. Photography lends itself to constant improvement, to constant learning, which is why it is so addictive. Do share your photographs. While people can be critical on social media, and especially if you have a lack of confidence, it is still important to have your work seen, because there is feedback that's provided, important feedback that will help you to improve your photographs. And with that in mind as well, do explore new ideas and interact with other photographers, because it'll help you to develop your own photography skills. And in the long term, this will help you to build yourself a portfolio, which is what you're going to have at the end of this course if you attend every single lesson. But finally, don't be too hard on yourself. Photography is fun, so have fun with it. Now, so that is the end of lesson number 1. I do hope you enjoyed it. Let's have a quick look at what we're going to cover in the next lesson. The next lesson is going to be all about having a look at our camera components. We're going to learn all about the different parts of the camera, all the different buttons and what they do. And this will allow us to choose the right mode as well to get the best photographs in every single situation. Will make sense. So thank you so much for joining me. Now, we do have a lesson challenge for you as well. I would like you to post up a photograph of your favorite photography style. You can post that to facebook.com/Shaw Academy, and you can also share them with us at support@shawacademy.com. Now, these are just for fun, so don't worry, you don't have to do them, but it is important to get thinking about your photography and to think about what you would like to do with it. Now, just remember, if you happen to miss the very start of the lesson, it is possible to reschedule your classes at any time. You can change the class date and time via your members area on shawacademy.com. You can also add to your calendar as well to ensure that you never ever miss a lesson. And if needs be, it's also possible to restart the entire course. Now, bear in mind as well, you can also catch up on recordings as well in your in your members area. You can go back over the lessons in your own time, and I do encourage you to do so, as there's plenty of information to pick up. So thank you so much for joining me for lesson number 1, and I'll see you all very, very soon for your next lesson. So until then, take care of yourselves, and so long.